All right. So Chris Whitaker, the agenda. Just want to welcome you guys again. Thanks, Billy and Teleconnect for having Sierra Wireless here. As I've kind of walked around early and talked to some of you about your businesses, I find most of you are either you're entrepreneurs, own your own business, or you're in the IT or telecommunications or security business. So a lot of what we're going to talk about over the next few minutes is relevant. So I also have Lori with me. Lori is our sales support manager, and she helps support our partners and our customers because, again, when you talk about outages, as we were just talking about, it's usually not a problem until it happens. And when it happens, it needs to be quick response, it needs to be quality and good follow-up. So that's something that we do, nationwide for our customers. So from an expectations standpoint, I hope over the next 10 or 15 minutes, some of these things seem kind of obvious. It's kind of a no-brainer what happens when the internet goes down. It's painful, but calculating the cost and the impacts and how to prepare for it is what we're going to talk about as well. So, outages, again, it seems pretty no-brainer, but there's about 10 or so outages. I just thought, hey, well, let's start there. What kind of outages can you expect? Having been in the telecommunications business for the last 17 years, I can tell you most people immediately blame their carrier, AT&T, Verizon, C-Spire, Comcast, whomever. And believe it or not, it's only about 45% of the time it's them. It's oftentimes stuff on, it's equipment failure, IT made a change on the config on the router the night before, and there's other reasons for outages. So as a business owner and business owners that are embracing technology, these are the kind of things we're going to talk about you need to be just thinking about. And of course, most of my customers, they're experts in industrial supply or dental work or chiropractor. They're not experts in a lot of the IT and telecom stuff. So that's why we're really happy to be partnering with Teleconnect and Billy, because through his relationships and his customer needs, that's where we kind of help there. So I think most of those are pretty self-explanatory. Again, power outages, that's another that people always think it's, in fact, I actually got the phone calls where they're upset the internet's out. I'm like, well, is a green light flashing? Well, no, none of them are flashing. Okay, well, why is it? Well, the power's out. Like, all right, so maybe it's not the internet after all, it's the power's out. It's amazing how that, so again, something to think about, and there's ways to even minimize that concern, from battery backups to having a generator. So again, it kind of depends just how mission critical the internet is for your business. Whether that battery backup or that power backup is something to think about. So it just kind of depends on what you're using the internet for. So this is a little infographic that my marketing team put together because probably the most obvious type of business that has the most negative impact from an outage is retail. Because anywhere where you're swiping cards and you're taking money from consumers for a service or a product, and when you can't do that, obviously you're losing money. So this conversation really, that's the crux of it is, are you losing money when the internet goes down? So that's, are the power's out, are the hardware fails, or your software is not up to date, and the firmware and the router is not working properly. There's so many little things you got to think about. And as we go into this 21st century of business, technology is really at the center of being efficient, improving your return on investment, improving your margins, because that's really the benefit of having this conversation. So yeah, I'm going to talk through all of it's kind of small print if you can read it, but kind of stage one, about a third of the customers, when they have this issue, it causes pain, right, and some angst. And again, if you're in the business of taking money from consumers, you don't want your customers leaving upset and angry. About half of them, they won't come back. Half of them, think about the times you pull up to get gas. We're just talking about this, and there's a handwritten sign on the gas pump, come inside, cash only, internet down. Do you really go inside? No, if you see another gas station across the street, you just go over there. So they just lost that customer, and they just kind of gives you a bad feeling about that business. And the same thing if you're buying food or products or services. And about a third of them are going to go to social media. We were talking about social media earlier. I mean, about a third of them are going to go, man, I'm at the Exxon, and man, I'm running late for work, and I have to go across town now to get gas. I can't believe it. So again, there's more impact to outages than just not be able to do something immediately. There's a lot of ripple effects. And fourth, we forget oftentimes, but if you're in the retail environment, or you have employees, and they're the ones that has to explain to the customer, hey, the internet's down, the network's down, can't help you right now. Give me your credit card information. I'll write it down. That's a real good one, right? No one wants to leave handwritten credit card information laying around. So employees have an impact. The morale, and in certain situations it might not be a big deal. Other situations it's a big deal. And of course, the last one, the manager or the business owner calculating the cost. How much is this outage costing me? Not being able to do business. So again, as you think about your business, and we're going to talk about that. Sometimes I got barbershops and tattoo parlors and all. Maybe they can go a day or two without internet. But again, if you're doing anything that's internet-based, voice over IP, credit card, point of sale, inventory control, environmental monitoring and management, all these things have a negative impact when you can't access them. So Billy pointed out to me, my slide here is kind of more of the Fortune 500 impact. About $46 million a year is lost because of outages. I know, David, you want to get into the Fortune 500 one day. It could be you one day. But even at the SMB level, we're going to talk about something a little more realistic, more closer to home here in a few slides. But the truth is, again, this is something that as every company that's growing, every company wants to increase their profit margins and deliver a better customer experience, embrace the technology, having the right resources and the right team, it's worth it. It's worth every dime you can put into it. So some factors to consider. Again, this topic, we're talking about what's the cost of an outage, and we talked about what outages are, and kind of looked at some denials that a lot of business owners and just don't think it's a big deal. But man, when it happens to them, it's a big deal, especially when you're waiting on that big quote to come in, or you got to get the big quote out, or you need to process a line of folks waiting to get their credit cards ran. That ripple effect, you want to avoid that. So we kind of hit some of these already. What's the impact on your employees and their productivity? I got CPAs and law firms. Well, if the internet's down and most of their stuff is on some kind of cloud-based database, you got 4 or 5 folks making $10 an hour to $15 an hour to $20 an hour sitting around doing nothing. There's only so much you can do because you can't access the data that you need to get to, so there's a cost there. And then the customer experience, and we kind of talked about that already. Do they have to wait? Or they have to go somewhere else? That's not the kind of marketing you want as a business owner. And another area that sometimes gets overlooked, it's kind of in the background, is your logistics and operations. Some of the companies I work with now, there's no more time clocks on the wall. You log into a portal, and that's how you log in for payroll, or any kind of security doors. A lot of the security doors in some buildings are online, and if the internet's down, you go to wave your badge, get in the door, you can't get in because the network's down. There's a lot of kind of behind-the-scenes stuff that, depending on your business model and depending on what you're doing, may or may not be a concern. But these are things you want to consider. Is like, what's the total impact of that outage? So probably a little more realistic, smaller business. 7 employees, average $10.50 an hour, $20,000 a month in sales. Say, call it a 3-hour outage. Most I think nationally, a cable outage is about 4 hours. It can be 4 minutes too. That 4 minutes could also impact equipment rebooting, and there's a ripple effect for the health of your information systems as well. But so this kind of example, you're looking at about $700 a month cost. So having a backup solution that's $55, $65 a month. It's not a bad trade-off. If you give me $65, I'll give you $800. That's not a bad return. And so going back to looking at this math, and Billy has this tool, by the way. We call it a downtime calculator. You can plug in your own numbers. You kind of play with it, and that kind of helps you determine is the investment of a backup is it worth it for you? It kind of goes back to what's the ripple effects, what's the impact. So yeah, Bill and his team's got that for you. So moving along here, we've talked about the different types of outages, how you can calculate the cost. So that's obviously what you're paying your employees, what your sales are, and how often does it happen. Simple math formula kind of tells you roughly what the outages are going to cost you and how much you should invest into that. And as you're growing and you're embracing more technology, the voice over IP, point of sale, as we mentioned, all these things are internet-based. So when the internet's down, you can't use them. So first thing, we talked about that, what's the impact, and then you want to find a trusted IT source. There's some here in the room, and of course, I'm working for Billy today, so Billy's my guy. That's who you want to have someone, because again, most of my customers are experts in their business. They're not experts in IT and network security, et cetera. So find that person, and then have a plan. This is something else I find a lot of businesses don't have. I'm sure it's kind of close to home. Natural disasters. What happens when that next hurricane is coming through? And I'm sure a lot of tenured veteran business owners, they have a plan. They know what's going to happen next. Is the generator ready? We have fuel ready. Who's on call? Who's on standby? So having a business continuity plan beyond even a technology type backup is important as well. So have a plan. What happens when the internet goes down long term? Who do you call? Of course, obviously your vendors need to be on that list as too. And Billy, I know a lot of the IT professionals, that's something they take those calls, and they'll help figure out what's going on. Is it a temporary outage? Is it a national outage? Is it going to be fixed in 15, 30 minutes, et cetera? Another kind I just want to throw out, this is something we're seeing more and more of too, is SD-WAN. It's a software-defined wide area network. Typically used for multi-site type businesses, but there's a couple of vendors I work with that you can have your cable connection and say a serial wireless connection or any second or third connection, and it manages that for you. It aggregates the connections, it takes 2 or 3 internet sources and treats it as one output. So when you do have an outage, a carrier network outage, you generally don't even know what happened, because this device is kind of doing air traffic control for you and making sure that your network stays up. So if you have a voice over IP call, you're running transactions, you don't even take a step back. It just keeps working, right? So without something like that, there's an interruption in your services there. And again, look at the powers a part you have to factor as well. I mean, I know you get the summer storms come through, and we're going to have a snowpocalypse tomorrow, right? A threat of flurries. But I know I have customers up in the north. They have a lot of power outages for that. So having a plan for that is a part of something to consider for the outages. So I wanted to kind of segue into what I do and how I help with this conversation. We talked about the importance of having that backup. So Sierra Wireless, we've been around for about 25 years, and we're a cellular technology company. That's what we do. And having that last mile is usually the most critical part of any kind of carrier network solution. That's usually where the problem happens. The truck hits the pole gets knocked down, the internet goes out, and then you got to wait 4 hours to 4 days to get something fixed. So we have a lot of different solutions that help with that discussion. Because we leverage AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, and Sprint, we have coverage pretty much wherever there's a population of the whole 50 states and Puerto Rico. We have devices with dual SIM, meaning you got network diversity there with 2 different carriers that can toggle back and forth on whichever one is stronger or active. We have an SLA, which means we have a service level agreement, meaning that we have some teeth in our contracts. If there's any problems, obviously that's something the business owners don't want to pay for something that ain't working. Without an SLA, when you're looking at carrier services, it just means it's best effort, and good luck with that. And then that's not a plan. We make wireless backup simple, safe, and secure. We manage it for you. We include the equipment and the install. So that's something that we help Teleconnect with. And it's 24/7 live support, 365. So what point is it to have a retail environment or anywhere that's just really relying on that connection? And if something's not working, you got to have someone there to take the call and figure out what's the process to get it back up and running. So from the equipment to the install, the support, and working with Teleconnect is one point of contact. Got a few more slides on some case studies and some real customers that we help. And again, I realize a lot of these seem to be larger, but the same pain points are felt by large companies and probably more so for smaller companies, because having a loss in revenue, that's not good for any, regardless of your size of your company. No one likes to lose revenue. So with Ashley Furniture nationwide, we do backup for them. Buying furniture, obviously the average ticket there is $1,000+ when they can't process that transaction. It's a problem. If they can't do inventory management, that's a problem. And again, some of these examples are exactly that $46 million I was talking about earlier in loss. Remote monitoring, we're talking about the gas and oil business. We do a lot with Sunoco Logistics and other gas power companies, water treatment facilities, but waste management, we do a lot of their stuff as well because of a lot of it is regulatory. I mean, anytime you're talking about wastewater or the fuel, energy, you need to be able to monitor that stuff remotely. It's when there's a problem, you can get all over it. Urgent and temporary, this is a customer of ours that was trying to open up a senior living home, and we're going to have a ribbon cutting ceremony and everything, and the day before, the carrier shows up and says, yeah, we made a mistake, it needs construction, it's going to be 90 more days, and they were already running late on the project, and so it's putting their whole grand opening in jeopardy because they couldn't get an occupancy permit without connectivity, without the voice service and the security being active. They couldn't start moving folks in. So we were able to, about 3 or 4 business days, get out there and get things up and running for them, and the partner saved the day, and we kind of helped them with that. So we see this a couple times a week, honestly. Somewhere in the country, there's some urgent situation where it's usually around some kind of grand opening or some big project deadline. If you don't have internet for that, and again, most of the tools we're seeing now, technology, it's all very much internet-based. BL Harbor, anybody heard of them? They're a Birmingham-based company. They're a construction company. So this is something we do a lot of as well. Construction trailers is hard to get connectivity to. So we, if you have remote sites, we were talking about remote sites earlier, that you can't get any cable or DSL T1 there. Our services can help with those as well. So kind of start with an infographic. We'll do some questions here in a moment, but kind of want to finish up with a cartoon. Everybody likes Dilbert. I get this conversation a lot. I'm sure Billy can appreciate it, and anybody in IT can appreciate it. The boss says, hey, I've lost everything. What happened? Well, the network's down. He's like, I need to know about these unplanned outages in advance. And that's just the reality a lot of carriers and solution providers work in. So that's something that I encourage you to do is, take some of the things we talked about today, the factors to consider, how does it impact your business, reach out to an IT professional, call Teleconnect and say, hey, help me through this process because you may or may not feel comfortable with this conversation because it's maybe not your thing or maybe it is, but regardless, part of your business continuity plan is to think about this, what's the impact, what can you do to minimize or mitigate these negative impacts on loss of revenue. So with that, again, appreciate your time, and if there's any questions, I'm sorry, I wanted to, so this is one of our devices, thanks Bobby. Yeah. So this is just one of our modems. It's got the 4 Ethernet ports, built-in Wi-Fi, and we actually have a smart antenna that connects to this that allows us to have the SLA, or it can be the paddle antenna. It's just depending on, again, it all goes back to the solution. So we have a lot of different options there for you. But on that note, I think I've covered a lot kind of fast, and I appreciate you hanging in there with me. Is there any questions from the audience or anything around security or? Yes. It is, right now it's 50 states and Puerto Rico, probably be more international by this time next year. So Sierra Wireless does have some machine-to-machine and Internet of Things solutions that is worldwide, but this particular managed service, because it requires us to do the installs and it requires us to have a relationship with the carriers, it's just right now the 50 states of Puerto Rico, but we're expanding that over the next 12 months. Good question, yeah.
How do you determine on the dual SIM cards what's the best fit for a client based on the area?
Great question. The question was, how do we determine which carrier to send out, and in the dual SIM scenario, which 2 do we pick out of the 4? So we have a process called a radio frequency analysis. We take the site list of the customer, there'll be 1 site or 2,000 sites. We actually look at where the site is in relationship to where the cell tower is. We have a lot of information, analytics from the carriers of tower saturation and capacity, and we basically have a scientific approach to picking the strongest 2 carriers to send out. So you may have multiple sites with different carriers, but at the end of the day, it's still 1 bill, 1 portal, and 1 data pool for managing your costs there. Good question.
That would work going through a firewall and then put it in front?
It plugs in. It's an Ethernet handoff. Just treat it like you would a cable modem connection. It's a broadband connection. So long as there's an open WAN port on your firewall, it plugs in there. It's just another. It's just considered another broadband connection. Yeah. Question.
You had mentioned having several networks all together in the event that one goes down, it just picks up the next. Does that work wirelessly as well?
Yeah, it can. So when you say wireless, you mean like Wi-Fi or with our service or cellular?
Either or.
So this device, the SD-WAN device, would sit in front of the firewall, or well, depending on which brand, there's some that sit in front or behind. But it has one output that would go into your Wi-Fi access point, and my service plugs into this device as well as a cable modem or a fiber connection or T1. So you can take multiple connections. And Bill, you guys cover SD-WAN as well, right? I know you have access through Tolaris relationship to several different options. So again, the end user. The good news is your employee doesn't get frustrated because the end user doesn't even notice there's an outage. The customer has an impact because they can still run their credit card, inventory management still, everything's still going on, and this device in the background in the server room is managing that crisis. And at the same time, that device is also notifying whoever is the technical contact, hey, you got a problem, one of your networks just went down, and it gives IT opportunity to dive into it and figure out what's going on. And again, it may come back up by the time you even know about it, and maybe you got a bad connection somewhere, you got to call the carrier.
Virtually guaranteed not having ever happened to that.
Well, as much as you can, yeah, as much as you can. Nothing's 100% anymore. I tell people I wish it was a 100% solution to outages, but there just isn't. Whether it be a denial of service attack or someone hit the pole. But you're right. When you have something like that, that's using technology to ensure you're doing all you can to prevent outages. And like with anything that adds that much value, it's another line item, another cost to look at. But when you do the ROI and you look at the cost of an outage, and even our small SMB case of potentially losing $800 a month, you have to spend if I'm 65 and an SD-WAN solution is another 30, so you're looking at $9,500. Still not a bad return to ensure you're always up and running. Yeah. Any other questions? I think.
Yeah, antenna that hooks up to that.
Yes. So this is what we call our best effort solution, and we take the paddle antennas off, and we plug in a smart antenna that has 5 filters, and it filters out all the non-carrier noise, and it amplifies the carrier and receiving signal. So we're the only provider that has this patented antenna that can give you that SLA on a cellular 4G LTE tiny connection. So 90% of the time it's mounted indoors. It's mounted in the server room, because one thing about LTE, it goes through walls. Just your cell phone's working here, and so would this service. Right. Yeah, wherever you have your telecom room, where your servers are, your routers are, we install all this right there. And about 10% of the time we do have to go outdoors if it's like a metal building with no windows, or the telecom room is in the basement. Sometimes we need to go outdoors, but 9 out of 10 times it's inside.
Can you clarify for those who don't know what an SLA is?
Thank you. Yeah, so SLA, service level agreement, that's terminology that anytime you're looking at connectivity from any kind of solution provider, it's just as it applies. Some people will say, yeah, it's just a marketing term, but if you read in it, in fact, with us, we actually have technology that backs up our SLA, so it's not just a marketing term. 99.9% is a standard, some are 99.99%, and that just means, hey, if at any time it doesn't deliver as advertised, you get money back. So it's actually like a money back guarantee in writing versus having to fight with your carrier about, hey, I was down for 2 days, you need to pay me something for my losses. It's all in black and white in writing, and you want to look at carriers that have, they can explain how they monitor that. So we actually had a portal, and we had those 5 filters I mentioned. We have a link score. We actually monitor and score our connection. It starts at 800 points, if you will, at midnight, and then as the day goes on, every time there's a hiccup on the network or any kind of packet loss or latency, it deducts from that points. And once it gets to 700 points, it triggers our help desk, and it starts, hey, what's going on? There's something going on. Is it the tower? Is it the equipment? Is there some interference? Did someone move the equipment without, when they shouldn't have? And that helps us kind of ensure that SLA is met, as opposed to just hoping it's met. So, any other questions? I think that's. I appreciate it. We got a smart crowd here. So with that, we'll wrap it up, and me to hand it over to Bobby or.